All right, well, welcome everybody to Dispersing the Fog. This is episode 17 of the Dispersing the Fog podcast. I'm Adam Rogers here with Paul Palango. I want to welcome everybody to our Sunday night gathering here. We've got some plans for this show. We're going to start off talking about this police review, comprehensive police review that came out this week from the province of Nova Scotia and much anticipated, I guess, review, and it was released a few days ago. Paul's been talking about it on the radio already. We're going to talk about that tonight, and then we're going to bring in a special guest for the second half, Chad Jones, one of the investigators that have been citizen investigators that have been helping Paul out over the last number of years with many things, I guess, back to the Nova Scotia mass casualties and the analysis since then. So we're looking forward to inviting and welcoming Chad into the show for the first time. Many people Paul, have probably heard Chad's name before and would have no idea what he looks like. So this will be a big revelation for many of your fans and readers. So looking forward to that. How are you doing?
Crazy, crazy week. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just insane. All the stuff that's going on. I mean, Chad and I and another person were up last night till 11 o'clock chasing stuff. Unbelievable. That's, for the future. But before we start, I want to teach you something.
Oh, all right.
I want to teach you something in Italian. Since I'm sort of Sicilian, Italian, Scottish, Irish, but I
Oh,
still have a little bit of Sicilian in me.
line go, sure.
So I'm going to give you a very simple lesson in Italian, and I'm going to, I want everyone out there to understand this because this is going to be my greeting for politicians and police in the future. And I'm going to use it as much as possible and make it a meme. I want it to go viral. So
Don't
here
tell
it
me you had a
goes.
meme.
So here I go. I've got to take my glasses off. You got to make this face. Make your fingers go like this, and you go like this. Who killed Corey Ellison? Who killed Corey Ellison? Tell me.
Who isn't
There,
that
you gotta get the
who
finger up there like
who
that.
killed Corey Ellison?
Like Silvio Dante in The Sopranos. Who killed? You gotta make your mouth perch.
Who
Yeah, pursed like
who killed?
killed Corey Ellison. Tell me, Mr. Houston. Tell me, Mr. Carney, who killed Corey Ellison?
Yeah. Everybody's asking that question these days, Paul. Like this is it is just so clear now after this your latest book, the reaction to it, people are on board with this. It is an open question. And that's a good way to phrase it.
Well, I saw a comment from somebody saying, "Oh, that FM Palango didn't prove anything in his book." I proved a fantastic thing. I think you'll agree. I proved that not only was their narrative false, but the constituent elements of the narrative were also false. So if all that was false, what's the truth?
Yeah. It must be something like that. There's just no avoiding it. There's
Yeah,
the timing of it, so many aspects of it, the exit from the community. Um, these things just simply don't add up. And so something else must have happened. And so the killer of Corey Ellison is a mystery at the moment.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And the funny thing was, Chad and I talked about this the other day when it came up. I had a couple of psychics approach me.
Oh.
And I sort of find psychics interesting, not because I believe what they're saying, but I learned from an old acquaintance of mine who I met over the years, who had killed three people and was running from the police and hoping not to get caught. And one of the things he was doing was, he told me, was wearing earphones and playing heavy metal music because he didn't want the psychics to hear what he was thinking. Because psychics drive people with secrets crazy.
Yeah.
And so the people who are involved in killing and covering up the Corey Ellison thing Um, Psychics are out there lurking. And the two psychics who contacted me didn't, they asked for my help. I said, "Well, who killed Corey Ellison?" There's my question.
Yeah.
And both of them could not give an answer other than there's a dark, mysterious place and all this stuff going on. And so for the future, I want psychics, maybe they should consult with my friend over here, the magic the magic
That's
glass
pumpkin.
pumpkin,
Yeah.
because it seems to know a lot. Or they can do what Chad and I and others do, work till 11 o'clock at night, read my books, and maybe you'll have a good idea of what's going on. So
Yeah. You have to be, psychic is one thing, although, what was the Robertson Davies book? The trilogy with, oh, am I getting that wrong? The trilogy, and one guy was ended up being a magician, but he had a psychic element to the show. But he goes into you must know these books, Paul.
I
No.
read them all, and I can't remember what they are at this
I
moment.
can't remember either. I read them a couple of years ago, and but the guy was a psychic. But what happened? He had these pickpockets, and in the audience, so he would have pickpockets getting things out of people's pockets, and replanting them at the end of the show, and he'd learn a couple of things about them, and then that was his how he became, how he was able to say things or know things about them. So there's always these little tricks, but you could also just do what you do, which is be relentless and do all the research and read all the documents and read things that nobody else reads. And that's
That's
also a way
right.
to figure things out.
And it's helped make me, you, and everyone around us psychic because we predicted the future, that it was a cover up, and we can show it's a cover up.
Uh, One thing that I think we probably could have predicted, and I think did predict, Paul, was that uh, nothing really changes. And this policing report, comprehensive police review, came out this week. It was called for it was called for before the mass casualty commission started. I think it might have been called for before the mass casualty, and it was
No, it was like 2022. It
yeah, okay.
was at the beginning of the Mass Casualty
But there
Commission.
was some talk at the time that the justice minister had this on his radar, but it was uncertain as to whether he had actually done anything to put it into effect at the time of the mass casualties. And it's like, well, now we definitely need a police review. Okay, well, we're going to put that off for a while we do this mass casualty commission. And then based on the findings of the mass casualty commission, we'll continue, the province that is, will continue this policing review. And so, okay, so we get the mass casualty commission, and for whatever it was, ups and downs, at the end, it came out with the report saying, there's some major problems with the RCMP, and one of the things that we recommend is a review of the RCMP's contract policing mandate, uh, position, all these things. And okay, so then Nova Scotia rolls along and says, okay, we're going to do this review. Uh, a cynic at the time would have said, well, this is just going to be another report, and we're going to end up in the same spot as we are today with policing as it is currently structured in Nova Scotia. But when then we get the report this week, and lo and behold, what is it? It is a report that recommends essentially the status quo. Is that what you read? Is that how you read it, Paul?
It's unbelievable. First of all, and not only is it the status quo, but it's worse than the status quo. It defies the Mass Casualty Commission recommendations completely because the Mass Casualty Commission said report was get rid of the RCMP and contract policing, which is that's going on across the country right now. That it's sort of leaning that way. And even the deputy minister of public safety in Nova Scotia, public safety attorney general, sat on the mass casualty implementation committee
Yeah.
for the first year. And she's like, everything's gone the other way. So this tells me that the Justice Ministry, the Public Safety Ministry, Attorney General has nothing really to do with this. This is coming from Tim Houston, the Premier. He's running things and he basically doesn't want to change anything.
So I agree with that assessment. It seems like the decision is at the coming from the top. Although, okay, interestingly, in a sense, it was the Justice Minister who made the announcement, Becky Drewin, who is a lawyer. But she was not the first Justice Minister in this government. There were two, Brad Johns and Tim Hallman, temporarily before this. So it took her a little while. She was the first lawyer in this government to be appointed as Justice Minister. But it seemed to me like an announcement that was being made by the minister just in case it didn't go well. And then the premier could distance himself from it if all of a sudden there was a backlash against what was being announced. And then the premier could override the minister and, say that this was okay, we've thought about it a little more and we're going to go in a different direction. So we'll see. We'll see what the reaction is. It's,
Well, Adam, the when I was on the Todd Vino show on Thursday, I think it was Thursday, Friday. On Friday, I said, "Thank you, Mr. Houston. This is the cherry on the top for my book, Anatomy of a Cover-Up, because you basically shown that the cover-up I'm describing in the book had a motivation. The motivation was to keep the RCMP on the job in spite of all the odds and all the egregious things that the force did. uh, there is no momentum for change in spite of the mass casualty recommendations. I mean, the first two reactions I got, one was from former Cape Breton Police Chief Edgar McLeod, who was once head of the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, a police instructor at Holland College in PEI. He wrote me, WTF is going on WTF is going on inside the Nova Scotia Department of Justice. This makes no sense whatsoever. They are opting for less effective and less efficient policing. They ignored the MCC recommendation, Edgar, and a similar one from Shirley Heafy, former head of the RCMP Public Complaints Commission, who said almost the same things. Are they stupid in Nova Scotia? Do they not understand what's going on across the country with the RCMP? They're trying to hammer this square peg into a round hole. I mean, it's insane. I mean, what they've done is it's like a malignant narcissist. The RCMP has been accused of all these things and it's proven, a lot of it's been proven. And instead, they've projected their own foibles and failings onto the backs of municipal police force.
yeah.
It's like gaslighting, saying, well, the municipal police forces are the problem here. The municipal police forces were kept out of everything in the mass casualty. They had nothing to do. They were boxed out. And now, essentially, the government, the DOJ, which is largely staffed by ex-RCMP and are sort of advising the government, are blaming the municipal police forces when the municipal police forces, the individuals, are better trained on average than any of the Mounties. People don't understand this. And they're fully accountable to the public.
Yeah.
They can't go to the washroom without somebody making a comment on it. Whereas the RCMP, I dared Drew and Houston find out how many are off sick in any detachment, how long they've been off sick, and what the roster is. You can't find out because the RCMP won't tell you. So why are you recommending more of this, even in a larger scale, when you can't hold them accountable, even at the basic level?
Yeah, like the municipal side of it, I'll step back in a moment, but the municipal side, I mean, they have oversight. They have local municipal oversight, and the RCMP doesn't. They have national oversight, such as it is, which is very weak. But I would have taken it a step even further in a sense, Paul, which is I would have said that this report could have been and read like it was written prior to 2020. Like, okay, so there were two reports. One is called Shaping the Future Policing in Nova Scotia, 21-page report from the government. Okay, this is a comprehensive policing review as described. The second is what they call a technical report from Deloitte. Deloitte, formerly thought of by people probably as an accounting firm, now is a broader sort of business consulting firm with an accounting focus. I guess. All right. The report, the Shaping the Future of Police, the recommendation is that the structure of policing stay as it is, that Nova Scotia develop a new set of policing standards, and if municipal forces cannot meet those standards, that the RCMP would step into those municipalities and take over policing. So it's 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 laughable in a sense. But okay, so what are the recommendations? Very predictable. Uh, like I say, could have been written in 2019. Okay, there should be one record system for Nova Scotia. Now there's three, just like health records. More diversity in the forces, sensitivity to race, ease financial pressure on municipalities, investments to combat new threats like cybercrime, and help from non-police individuals for mental health calls. All right, well, yeah, some of that was aligned with recommendations from the Mass Casualty Commission, but all of those are things that could have been said in 2019 or 2010. Nothing's new about this.
You actually hit on a really good point. Well, first, there's a bunch of good points. So the number one, when was this done? Deloitte Touche did a report in 2023 for the government of BC regarding the Surrey police force being set up and the RCMP being kicked out of their largest detachment. The Deloitte report recommended the RCMP and made the case the RCMP would be a much cheaper organization to have in Surrey than a Surrey municipal police force. And the government of BC under Premier Eby said, hit the road. He saw it for what it was because the RCMP and the federal government tend to make up numbers to make their case and make taxpayers believe this is a better deal. We all know that it's not a better deal. BC said to the Deloitte report, see you later, kick the RCMP out of Surrey. They've now been kicked out of Grand Prairie. They're on their way in Kelowna. They're now their largest detachment. Nobody believes them. So that the other thing is that you hit on was the they focused on the record system, that there's three different systems of record keeping in Nova Scotia. RCMP, Cape Breton Police have one, Halifax Police have one, Versadex
Yeah.
versus versus the other ones. But the thing that stands out to me in this is how do we know a lot of the garbage that happened in the mass casualty afterwards? We know because it came out of the municipal police record
Right.
systems.
Yeah.
So the RCMP record system made things disappear and the RCMP could control it. But information came out of Amherst, Truro, and Halifax that put the lie to the RCMP story. So is this the RCMP going back saying we can't control the narrative if these other police forces have alternative narratives, the truth, basically? And I think that Mr. Houston and Ms. Drouin should be very concerned about this.
Wonder if it's just a financial decision, Paul. The RCMP is subsidized by the federal government, and therefore the provincial government doesn't have to pay as much. And if they went to a provincial force, there's no guarantee that the feds would chip in any percent. So
Well,
it
it may be a
cuts the difference.
negotiating thing, but I got news for you. You and I are paying for it, whether it's our left pocket or our right
One
pocket.
taxpayer. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one taxpayer. And this argument, like they're corporate entities and they have their own corporate fiefdoms, is bull. The world has changed. They're not adapting to it. And getting back to Deloitte Touche,
Yeah.
this is their business. They see everything through a business lens, not through a justice lens. They want one flat policing entity. That would make more sense. But that allows no sort of investigation, no oversight, no real oversight. If you have a case like the Corey Ellison case, who's going to investigate it? I mean, who's going to investigate it now?
Yeah.
Because we don't have layered policing. The police are not afraid of any other police force because there's no one there to investigate them. And finally, on the Tim Houston, when Tim Houston started out his career as an accountant working for Deloitte Touche offshore in Bermuda, doing tax accounting for wealthy Canadians who didn't want to pay their taxes or as much taxes as possible. the very money that sort of keeps these entities alive, these public entity and institutions alive. Mr. Houston says, at the time, oh, I didn't do anything wrong. He eventually went into other aspects of offshore money handling before he came back to Nova Scotia. His view of the world is very sort of corporate and not doesn't necessarily operate in the public interest. When you're an offshore tax lawyer, you're not operating in the public interest. And the other thing, I had one of his associates contact me in the last couple of days and sort of astounded by what has gone on with this report. And this is what they said about Tim Houston. I'm going to quote it. He kind of lives in an unrealistic bubble. He believes all errors belong in the past. It's all about sunshine and rainbows. Forget the past because we can't change it and move forward with bubbles and candy floss. And this is one of his acquaintances. And I think that, what that tells you is, to quote George Santayana from 1905, those who can't remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Uh, Houston thinks, well, you bury all these problems in the past, we'll have we'll move on, make everything nicey nice. But the fact is, the RCMP, the past of the RCMP is the present of the RCMP, and it's going to be the future of the RCMP. Read the reports. Nothing has changed for 30 years.
It's just such it breeds such cynicism. I'm a Gen Xer, so I'm a natural cynic anyway. But you get these reports, you think, all right, there's a big institution, but it has big problems. How could it ever change? Well, we've spent what, $50 million, whatever it was, on the Mass Casualty Commission, recommended it. There was public criticism. Surely now, if ever, would be the time for major change to take place. And there's like, nope, no, it's not because it's cheaper, and it's cheaper to stay with the RCMP with the existing system. It's hard to make change. It takes a lot of political capital, and we don't feel like spending political capital on this issue, which may or may not be top of mind for many Nova Scotians anyway. So it's just simply not going to happen. It's it's just so disappointing that that's the calculus that is likely being made here.
Well, the other thing is that the RCMP has a real sort of track record of promising the moon to a municipality or a province and then pulling it all back quietly. So they've created, for example, they built this big headquarters in Dartmouth on Garland Avenue.
Hmm.
And in it, they've jammed all the communications against the advice of many, sort of right-thinking people. You don't put all your communications in one place. Something bad happens, you have no communications. Secondly, they set up and promised a giant state-of-the-art forensics labs that all police forces in Nova Scotia and the East Coast could use. They've quietly moved that all to Ottawa, I understand. It's not in Nova Scotia anymore. So part of the calculus for the argument is if a municipal police force cannot provide its own lab, therefore it doesn't meet the standard. Therefore, you have to have the RCMP in there, where they've changed the ground rules and the government has allowed them to change the ground rules when we should have labs in our area. Investigators are traveling all over the place now because of the way the RCMP has set up the system. Partly, probably, it's because of phony efficiency arguments, but also strategically to put provinces and municipalities in a box because the RCMP wants to control everything for itself. Meanwhile, federal policing is not getting done because the RCMP is fixated on handing up parking tickets or traffic tickets in Lunenburg County,
Yeah,
It's
it's
unbelievable.
it's something else. Like I'm seeing this in court more and more often, where we're getting experts out of Ottawa from the police and requests to have them testify by video for that reason, which sucks as a lawyer because you know a lot of the time when you have an expert, it's presented by the Crown. But as the defense lawyer, you can talk to that expert. You can talk to them before they testify. You're outside the courtroom and you can, hey, well, what if I asked you about, you can pare down your examination a little bit, maybe learn a few things before you go in. And now that's not the case because everybody's by video. Uh,
Yeah, and it's it's the tyranny of efficiency. It's not a good thing.
the other thing I noticed, Paul, okay, so back to this Deloitte report, 128 pages, very nice looking report. Like it seemed like they spent most of their time trying to figure out how they would have such cool graphics throughout it and nice charts. It looks good. But there was one thing I was looking for because I know a few people that work at Deloitte, and I was like, wonder who worked on this report from Deloitte. And you will not find the name of one person in that report from Deloitte. Who wrote this report?
I
Nobody.
tried to find out like you.
Nobody wrote it.
I know they have all kinds of ex-Mounties operating for them in their securities business that where where this comes from. And it looks to me like it was written by RCMP vets and RCMP former assistant commissioners and things like that. It's not written objectively. And I mean, people should be aware. This is a bad thing. I had a meeting yesterday or Friday with someone from Lunenburg who said we used to have a police force here before we went to the RCMP where the cops knew everyone and everyone knew the cops. Now the RCMP is in here. It's a disaster. Nobody knows who they are. You never see them around. They don't do anything. They don't know the community. Ironically, who's the public safety minister? Drouin. Where is she from? Lunenburg. So you can bet that detachment right now is up and running and has a full complement of people as long as she's public safety minister. So she could say, well, I don't see any problems here, but her own constituents are telling me about the problems.
Yeah. It's it reminds me, I remember in the Unconscious Civilization, or which one was it? John Ralston Saul was writing about The Economist, right? The Economist magazine or newspaper they call themselves, and how none of the articles have authors. They don't, and he's
Yeah.
like, this is supposed to be, and he said the idea is that it's presented as objective truth, but it's not. It's one person's written opinion or written view or written interpretation. Same as this Deloitte report. There's no author. There's no names attached to it. It's presented as though, well, this is just the objective truth, but it is far from it. By the
Well,
way, yeah,
that's how I found,
yeah,
I looked at it and I said, well, what other reports have they done? So it's easy
yeah,
to find the one in BC, and there's others around the country. It's from a template where the argument is the same all the time. The RCMP is the best.
I know
Uh, it's
the,
not objective, and as you said, it's dated. It doesn't look, it doesn't look at the very fact that in March, the public safety in Ottawa put out a report saying the RCMP should not be in contract policing.
yeah.
They forgot to put that part in the report.
You would not know reading this report from Deloitte that there was any controversy, let alone a mass casualty commission report criticizing the RCMP. You wouldn't think there was any controversy as to whether the RCMP might have a bad reputation, might have an affected reputation. It's not mentioned. It's not alluded to. There's nothing to that effect in the report. It's kind of amazing. It's just written in another time and place. Uh, but I did notice, Paul. Okay, so remember, the famous story of, oh, I think it's Van Halen or one of the bands, and they put this thing in their rider, like, oh yeah, they no red M&Ms or whatever it was, just to check to see if people actually read it. There's a spelling mistake in this Deloitte report on page 62. Sorry, yeah, page 62. They're trying to spell alert and they spell it Akert. So maybe they rushed it in a little bit, but it was not perfect at all. Anyway,
Well, when you got a premier who thinks he's being efficient in buffaloing people, as it were, um, bad things like this happened. We're not giving up, as I said. Well, we're moving forward, and I think people just have to get on their hind feet, complain, and base, you see that police chiefs and municipal politicians are standing up. I mean, I saw Ian Rankin, the former premier, has waded into this a bit as he's the public safety critic.
Yeah.
He's got to be a little more effusive. And, people have to, in the 5 years since the mass casualty, he's the only politician who stood up and asked a question at the federal or provincial levels. So good for him. But let's be a little more dramatic. Let's drive home the story.
Yeah, he doesn't really have a super aggressive style, and that didn't help him when he was premier. The other one though is Claudia Chender for the NDP, Paul, and met with her a few weeks ago down in Wagmatcook at the Gladue court there, and one of the comments, I mean, she's interested in justice issues. She's a lawyer herself, interested in reform, and more focused on the intimate partner violence side of things. But her, I guess, question or concern is how do you generate political interest in these things? And it's not a simple thing to do. I think this report is something that is open to be criticized by the opposition, and I think people could make something of it and use it in a political way that would also do some good for for us, for the public.
Absolutely.
All right, Paul. That's so that's the those are the two reports shaping the future of policing in Nova Scotia. Who knew anyway? We'll see if there's any change really. Uh we have uh we have Chad Jones waiting to join us here. Are you have anything else you want to say about the report or
No,
anything
I'm
before
fine.
we
I think
bring
we've said
Chad in?
enough. I think that it'll continue in the future.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to bring in Chad Jones to this conversation. Everybody's going to be I think pretty excited to see Chad, so just bring him on in. Hopefully he's ready. Chad must be trying to avoid detection with that name.
Pat Jones.
Oh, wow.
Did you do that on purpose, Chad? I could change that.
Mm, no, just Chad Jones would be fine. I think I hit a button on my computer that
I'll fix it.
perfect.
Yeah.
So,
I-
Chad, since we haven't discussed this before, at the beginning of the show, I have a new introduction. I'm going to talk to people about, everyone we know that we politicians, police, in the future. This is the way we should be introducing ourselves. So people understand you hold your fingers like this, you make a face like this, and you go,
Peace.
who killed Corey Ellison?
What killing?
Tell people a little about who you are and how you got into
Yeah,
this.
Chad's famous, but nobody knows what he looks like. Everybody knows him
Uh,
here that watches the show and read Paul's books, but here we are.
so basically, my name is Chad Jones, obviously. I've been working with Paul on this investigation, as well as you and countless others, pretty much since the get-go. I want to say weeks after the tragedies that unfolded. So a bit about me beforehand. I'm not a trained police officer. I'm not I've never held that sort of role, but I am extremely into forensics investigations, um, everything that sort of side of law enforcement entails. So I've been into that for probably since I was a teenager. I used to rush home from school to watch American Justice and Cold Case Files. So I've always been into this sort of thing, and just on my own, getting some court files from the court to review, certain investigations, what was brought forward, and always just sort of found it to be a hobby I found extremely interesting. So, I'm from the area originally. I grew up there in Valley, outside of Bible Hill in Colchester County, which is to anybody who grew up there knows that it is a very very densely populated with RCMP officers. who work out of Colchester County. So we grew up with these people down the street as neighbors, etc. So so I knew, I knew a lot of rumblings that were going on in the community. Um, I had some information. I wasn't extreme, or I wasn't sure where to share it until I heard Paul one day on the Great Rick Howe show. So I made a phone call to him. We exchanged emails. We started exchanging phone calls. Before you knew it, after a couple months, we were talking every day, taking trips up to Portapic, um, going knocking on doors, making phone calls, and everything just sort of snowballed. And we kept at it, and I think we did a reasonably good job for a couple civilian guys, and we had some great people join the team, such as yourself, and here we are. I mean, we're over 5 years later. We've Paul's managed to put together a second book, and I think we're uh, bringing to light a lot of things that normal people in this community deserve to know, and likely wouldn't have known if they were depending on the MCC and those proceedings.
One of the reasons we wanted to have you on, Chad, was because tonight, for the rest of the show, we're going to look at the Heidi Stevenson shooting by Gabriel Wortman. And I think Adam and I both agree that you've brought a lot to that investigation, and you won't let it go. And I think rather than me expressing what happened or Adam commenting on it, I think we bring you in to help with the story and help people understand how we've arrived at what we think.
Yeah,
Sure.
What
it's
do you,
great to have the resource. I my favorite show growing up, Chad. I didn't have to rush home to watch it because it was on in the evenings. Was Matlock, and you'd be surprised at how few lawyers even are familiar with the show. But Matlock had Tyler Hudson. He had a private investigator, and he had a second private investigator later on. Anyway. But I just assumed that lawyers had private investigators. And when I became a lawyer and I wasn't just given a private investigator to go along with me, I was a little disappointed by that. So glad to have them. And anyway, always seemed to be the one that was
Just
screwing the
authors.
muck. What's that?
Just authors.
Yeah, that's right. But no, it's great. So yeah, interested in this, and I've been reading those chapters in the book this week as well. And anyway, it's a peculiar thing, right? There seemed like a desire at the time to generate or create or frame her actions as heroic. Somebody had to be a hero. There had to be a hero somewhere in this story, and there she was. And it's anyway, question as to
well,
how much person wants to pierce that, but there it is. You got to go with the
well,
flow.
Adam, let me explain.
Yeah.
Let's just go over quickly, like the brief narrative, and then how we tear it apart. Like the official narrative is that Heidi Stevenson was the stand-in shift commander in Enfield that morning. She showed up. She's a constable, acting as a corporal, not getting any extra pay for it. Has a couple of young guys and one sort of 10-year veteran working under her. They don't really know what's going on up in Colchester County. They take positions on Highway 102, the expressway, except one of the members, Chad Morrison, is at the Gaze River Road, Highway 224 in Shubenacadie. Wortman comes down Highway 2, somehow knows where Morrison is, turns, fires some shots at him. Morrison leaves, skids out of there, hits the guardrail. Uh, Wortman's in pursuit of him. They're going southbound on Highway 2, which turns into 224 at the Cloverleaf. But just before there's a ramp down to the continuation of Highway 2. Morrison goes that way. Wortman continues along towards Highway 224. As Morrison turned off, Heidi Stevenson was going under the bridge. He didn't see her. She didn't see him. She came up around the cloverleaf. Wortman rammed her. Um, there's gunfire. Heidi Stevenson's killed. Um, in a, Good Samaritan Joey Weber stops to help. He's put in the back of Wortman's fake police car. He's killed. Wortman sets the cars on fire, takes Weber's car, and drives away. That's the bare bones of the story, right? The first
That would be,
narrative.
yeah, that's the narrative that was presented.
Yeah, that's the first narrative. Then the second narrative, they try to say, well, Heidi rammed Wortman. That came from the RCMP union. And she took him off the field and saved lives. And then the RCMP said, no, 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 that didn't happen in an official statement. He didn't ram her, but she was in a gunfight with him. And later, 2 years later, they make the argument or the case during the MCC that Heidi Stevenson actually fired 14 shots at Wortman and winged him in the temple, and that's how he was identified in the end. So that's the second narrative. And what we've done, gone over all the evidence, Chad and I and others, Ryan Potter, and we've gone through this over and over again in the book, and it's quite clear none of that happened. So Chad, where do you come into this?
Well, I mean, I think early on, it was obvious they were grasping at straws, and you had Brian Solveig from the police union, come out with this heroic story, that she engaged him and stopped him, and how many others may have been killed had she not have done that. Um, I I was quite I think the first big thing was when Darren Campbell came out and said that didn't happen. Um, that that was I think detrimental to the police union, and but in light of the ongoing I guess the ongoing public pressure to call a public inquiry instead of review, I found extremely interesting.
What didn't happen was Heidi Stevenson didn't ram Wortman,
Right,
which
sorry.
people to this day think happened, but that didn't happen. The RCMP denied that. The evidence quite clearly shows that didn't happen.
No, and to be honest, probably to the contrary. He may have rammed her. I don't believe she rammed him whatsoever. They did come out and say that his vehicle sustained more damage, but I think the big thing of that was the time frame in which they were talking about this, when there was absolute, huge public scrutiny on a review versus an inquiry, etc. Um, the I think the other huge telling thing, Chris Leather came out and um, said, we believe she engaged gunfight with Wortman. If anybody has gone through the documents, etc. The pressure against that story was quite clear by Pat Curran, the interim director of search.
Let me interject there. People might not follow that. Or do you want to pick up on that?
We'll go ahead, Paul. Yeah.
The RCMP, what they did in the days after the shooting was they went to Pat Curran, who was then the interim director of CERT, and tried to make the argument that CERT should investigate the shooting because they believed or they were worried that Heidi Stevenson had accidentally shot Joey Weber and that the search should be investigating. And Pat Curran, in the shortest of letters to the RCMP, back to Chris Leather, then the chief superintendent in charge, said, you just told me she was executed on the afternoon of, and an investigation is already taking place that proves that. Why are you bringing me in
Why?
2 days later to investigate something that's this far down the line? He basically told him to hit the road because I think he could see right through what they were trying to do. If you try to do an investigation into whether Heidi Stevenson shot or didn't shoot Joey Weber, that would somehow prove that there was a gunfight, even though 27 witnesses at the scene did not see any of this happen.
Quite a startling letter, Paul, and one that I was not familiar with until Anatomy of a Cover-Up. Maybe it came out before. It certainly wasn't brought to prominent attention, I guess, through the MCC process.
Well, did you ever find it, Chad? You didn't find it till I found it, I guess.
I I don't believe I did until we did. I mean that's their strategy, right? Had this come to light, or had Pat Curran testified in a timely manner, um, I think things may have went differently at the commission.
In fact, the MCC didn't interview Pat Curran or anyone associated with CERT until everything was all done.
Exactly.
The media had gone away.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think another key witness to that was never called, and I have my suspicions as to why, was Sergeant Darren Bernard.
Yeah.
His testimony and interview with commission investigators, um, even his own people, was extremely telling. One thing that I thought the police union didn't jump on, and would have thought that they would have had access to this piece of information when they first came out and cast this story, is I believe Heidi Stevenson was inquiring about an alert at 8, 9 o'clock in the morning. And, again, in that 90-page report that's buried there, along with Sergeant Darren Bernard's testimony and, the obvious issues they had with talk channels and lack of communication for members coming on shift. I mean, Enfield is learning about a Colchester incident through members in Sackville.
Yeah.
There's something,
Quite clearly, they didn't tell Heidi Stevenson what was going on in Colchester, and they were trying to contain it in Colchester. We've talked about this before. But getting back to the Heidi Stevenson shooting, there are a number of issues. There's a witness they didn't highlight, Bernard Myra, who
yep,
was right behind Wortman the whole time and parked in the intersection and watched what was going on, him and his wife. They don't address that. They make
no,
him disappear.
It's amazing. Like the two best witnesses, or three, I guess, the couple, and then Constable Darren Bernard, uh,
Sergeant,
Sergeant,
Sergeant Darren
sorry.
Bernard.
So who stayed with Heidi Stevenson's body for a long time afterwards until others came to deal with the situation. So certainly would have made some observations during that time that would have been relevant, I think.
Chad also spent a lot of times on the ballistics, and we brought in some people
Ballistics.
who are
Mhm.
um, experts on ballistics to look at the evidence. What did you and they find?
Well, I mean, the whole gunfight story has bothered me since day one, and because I believe it's disrespectful to Miss Stevenson and her family to be sort of used as a you
A
know
prop.
Yeah.
for lack of a better term, absolutely. So when this story came out, and they're giving I think they said they found 30 something total everywhere. There was obviously some going off in Wortman's trunk when he had lit the fire after he had killed Stevenson. But when we looked at photos that I'm not even necessarily sure the MCC saw, it's abundantly clear there's no holes in the windows. The only window that seems to be shattered is hers, where Gabriel Wortman had shot her from the back, I believe the back driver's side. And two shell casings on the floor. But what's always bothered me is these 14 shell casings that they found outside of her car. If you look back closely at the witness testimony, everything in its entirety, it's abundantly clear that she was executed and pulled out of the car. So it's always bothered me how they found these 12 shell casings outside of her car.
They made the argument that those 12 shell casings were fired by her, that she got out of the car, she engaged and fired 12 shots, then went back into the car to radio for help and fired 2 shots there or near there, and she was executed at that time, although no one sees her out of the car.
Exactly.
And the 30 shots seem to be tied to someone living up the hill who said they heard 30 shots in the initial phone call. And eventually they have ties to the RCMP and policing. And then the husband and wife, downsized the number of shots they heard later. But the number of shells seemed to grow. So where did they come from? And
Absolutely.
were they actually fired? Isn't that the question?
Well, and this is I guess that's what I'm getting at is personally, I believe that he dropped a magazine or a magazine malfunction when he was taking her ammunition off her. So I had always thought that they had been dropped outside the car and must have went off during the fire. I was quickly informed by an extremely smart ballistics expert that they would have appeared differently had they have gone off that way. So we reviewed the photos of the ballistics that were taken from the MCC records, and we asked him, what does this look like to you? Because I'm having a hard time with this after and his response was, these are extremely poor pictures. They were obviously taken for record keeping purposes only. They were done, in Ottawa by likely a civilian intake member. And they weren't taken until a month after by the date. So it's very hard to say if, because of the poor quality pictures, if they're even, the same shell casings.
Or if they were fired.
Right. They were fired or the same shell casings. Right. And what I'm getting at is, it's possible that is not a shell casing that they found outside the car. And that the shell casings that they found outside the car were indeed unfired bullets.
So wouldn't that be an important thing to think about if you were taking those pictures, Chad? Like there's been a fire here. That's also a possibility of how these may have discharged. And so what would the difference be? Like on the back of the bullet shell, then there'd be an impression if it was shot through a gun, but there wouldn't be if they just exploded?
Absolutely. I believe the trajectory of how they fire if they're on fire is different than a hammer hitting them in a gun. But yeah, I would think that would be extremely important, especially given the nature of the of what you're putting forth happened. Right. Again, no inconclusive ballistics on the report. poor quality pictures, um, seemingly ignoring files that were there and going sort of along with it. I mean, it's mind-boggling to me that you could pay that poor attention to something and try and make the public believe it.
But the public does believe it. I mean, I had a discussion today, this week, with a high-ranking journalist, and talking about that section of my book about Heidi Stevenson, about about Corey Ellison being shot, about Heidi Stevenson, etc. And the response was, you know what the response was, Adam? I don't really care if the RCMP made up a story about one of their members being a hero, you know, and that's the attitude of journalists. That a police force in a desperate situation like this clearly makes up a story. And the question obviously should be for any journalist, if they made that up, what else did they make up?
Course, like that's, yeah,
Absolutely.
if you're willing to do it here, you're willing to do it in many other places too, no doubt. All right, so where are those other places and should be checked into?
Well, and they're you know, definitely willing to do it in labs. So
It's quite,
what other evidence does that question, right? Without the scrutiny.
and I think, and I think that it was very cynical approach that we're going to make Heidi Stevenson, who was not trained very well, had failed her own carbine training and kicked out of the class, basically, which means she couldn't hit, as a ballistics guy said to me, that meant she couldn't hit the broadside of a barn door to get that far, that far down the list. She had no communications, no sense of how much danger she was in. So the alternative thing for the RCMP and the MCC to do is turn her into a hero rather than the victim she was of her own force. And as one Mountie said to me the other day, it's the Mountie way of doing things. Somebody gets killed on duty, hold a parade, shed some tears. Next.
Yeah,
No,
they're a hero,
that's
which
the way
means
they
we're not
operate.
at fault. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's unfair to the Stevenson family. It's unfair to her legacy that they should be learning from this and
Right.
not doing it again. But there's no indication whatsoever that the RCMP or the government of Nova Scotia has learned anything from this.
No, absolutely. We Chad spent the first half of the show talking about this police review that came out, which basically solidifies the view what Paul just said there, that there's not really
Astonishing.
been much learning, not demonstrated anyway.
No, no, absolutely not.
We've got a few minutes left here, Chad. Anything else standing out with the Heidi Stevenson situation that you turned up in your digging around, or anything else that you wanted to bring up?
Not much I can think of at the moment. But again, circling back to the broad amount of witnesses at that um, traffic circle and relying on the one who saw a very big anomaly in the story, and obviously has relationships with the RCMP and the government, um, to bring that forward and sort of hang their hat on that was just I
Well,
found it sort of vile.
it goes against anything you'd want to do in a normal criminal case, which
I
is
would think so.
find the witnesses who were closest to the situation, had the best vantage point, and see what they had to say, rather than the witness who was the furthest away and heard potentially or probably some echoes of gunshots and had a personal connection to the entity being investigated. So,
And that's an absolute
yeah.
indictment of the Mass Casualty Commission, the so-called Transparent Commission under Mr. McDonald, because he used to be a judge, so I'll call him Mr. McDonald. Um, that was their MO throughout. Onslow Belmont Fire Hall. Called the witnesses who were inside the fire hall, not the ones outside who saw what was going on. The ones inside just saw the holes being formed as the bullets came through the wall.
Yeah.
They didn't see who fired the shots. The MCC didn't want that. They didn't call the witnesses at Shubenacadie who saw what Wortman did. The thing to remember about the entire Wortman thing, the Wortman confrontation with Stevenson, from the time he rams into her, spins her around, gets out, shoots her, gets out of the car, 50 seconds max,
Less than a minute.
less than a
Absolutely.
minute. And they're trying, and as our ballistics guy said, I doubt Heidi Stevenson fired 14 shots at Wortman for one reason. You know what that reason is, Adam?
What?
He was dressed as a cop. She's a cop. She would hesitate to fire her gun at another cop.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially, and
She
who
didn't
knows
know.
how
She
little
didn't know who he
information she had
was.
about him at the time. Yeah.
Yeah, she didn't know who he was. And that in police think that's the number one thing that told this investigator, a professional investigator, it didn't happen the way the RCMP said it happened, or the Mass Casualty Commission endorsed.
Well, we've heard from
And
professional investigators, and we've heard from semi-professional, high-ranking amateur, ready to go pro. You'd be like, one of these boxers that's the Olympic champion, Chad, and you're like, when's he gonna go pro, right?
yeah.
Great job as citizen investigator throughout these last
He's
five
a,
years.
I'll tell you, I've dealt with reporters all my life. He's a damn good reporter. He could have been a reporter at a newspaper anywhere in Canada.
Well, look at him. He's as young as can be. He's got all kinds of time in front of him. Maybe he'll take that route.
You never know.
He's got more work to do with Paul first before that happens, or as that happens. So that's great. So Chad, thank you very much for coming on the show this week. We'll definitely have you back because there's lots more that we need to cover, and you're one of the guys that knows it the best. So thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I appreciate you. I appreciate the invite. Thank you very much, guys.
Yeah, that's great. All right, Paul, and we'll be back next week. We might have a special guest for next week too. Maybe not as cool as Chad, but pretty prominent as well. So we'll see.
Much,
We're reaching out to a prominent person who's been behind the scenes for a while, and this person is thinking of coming forward. Chad knows who he is.
Yeah. So
And it'd be
that
much
happens.
more prominent than myself.
worth your while to watch if he's on.
Yeah, we'll tease that for now, and hopefully it all comes together over the next few days, and we'll be able to bring that to you next Sunday night. So that's great, everybody. Thanks again to Chad, Paul. Great to see you as always, and thanks everybody for watching. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Guys.
Oh, wait.
Wait. Oh yeah, let's do it.
Who killed Corey Ellison?
Paul's standard greeting from now on. All right, everyone. See you next time.